Good evening. It is 7:39 p.m. on a Tuesday, May 13th. I'd like to tell you a couple of stories to start off with of personal experience and anecdotes, which isn't 100% evidence of anything, but I think it really matters to explain this. I have a lot of friends that aren't really that sensitive to a lot of things. And a lot of the time, we've had in a lot of conversations. Uh, some of them would say things like they don't like wokeness or that they don't like the cancel culture that exists. Many of them not understanding that I very easily could be one of those people that they're describing without fully appreciating it. Now, mind you, like I make jokes with my friend all the time. I have a Mexican friend who I constantly tell him I'm just going to call ice on him every time he's annoying. Or he calls me white and says that sorry for that my food doesn't taste good. We make jokes at each other's expense all the fucking time. Um, and so and me and a lot of my friends we kind of just do that. Like light uh, fucked up jokes is like a normal thing in a lot of guys' friendships. It amazes me how many people will tell me that they just want to say the R word or that they just want to be able to make a racist joke and it not be that big of a deal. And it honestly takes a moment of discomfort on their end to realize why people have a problem with it. A friend of mine um, is doing a thing for a particular agency, and he was talking about how he and his new friends and this training group were low-key making a lot of really funny racist jokes. Having had experience with this stuff before, I warned him. I said, "Hey, um, for this, obviously, if they're friends and you know that they're saying it because they know how ignorant it is, like they appreciate the humor and it being interesting, but you really have to be careful with that because some people actually believe those things." At one point in time, this friend came up to me and he told me that he kind of realized what I was trying to tell him when they were doing kind of like a little military march where they were singing a cadence. See, I knew that from personal experience that there's a lot of times, right, where like you can kind of make racist jokes, and a lot of times when you're wearing a uniform and when you're dealing with a lot of criminals in general, like you can understand the jokes a little bit, but there will occasionally be somebody who will come up to you and they will actually believe those things and they will use your desire of being allowed to make those jokes to be able to say their actual beliefs. It's for this very reason why I tend to get very uncomfortable with such statements. Not because they're not funny. Like there are jokes that you can be made, right? I can watch the Boondocks and appreciate the humor in Boondocks. I can watch Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle say some shit that may or may not be a little bit concerning. I can hear offensive jokes. It's when people actually believe those things I have a problem with it, and it's when those people cry about free speech when the people who are already making these jokes are making them regardless, and it's the people that cry the hardest about free speech that seem to usually be the ones that believe it most frequently. Now, I am not a religious person. I bring this up all the time. And the reason why I bring this up is because many of my life lessons I feel I can somehow relate to my own personal experiences to somewhat, not fully, but somewhat understand other people's experiences a little bit and maybe understand why certain actions I take might affect other people in a certain way. So when you're growing up as an atheist in America, in the Bible Belt, now for context, uh, the city I grew up in had more churches than restaurants. Or it was pretty close to the same number. Or there was one area where there's maybe a bunch of restaurants, but throughout the city you had almost no restaurants. You had nothing but churches and random businesses that maybe like small restaurants here and there. They're not you're more likely to find a church than a McDonald's. That's kind of the Bible that I've kind of experienced a little bit. I grew up in time where I had to learn how to be able to move past that. I grew up in the Bible Belt where it's easier to find a church than a restaurant most of the time. And so there are things that you hear as a non-religious person that you hear. You know, I've been told that if I would just believe in God, we wouldn't have hurricanes. I've been told I just want to sin by people who believe in God and sin anyway. I've been told that I actually do believe in God, but I actually hate Him. I've been told that I just want to be a bad person by people who are bad people already. I've been told that I actually need to believe in God, and oh, I need to believe in their own version of God, and oh, fuck those other people that believe in a slightly different version of it. There are things that you kind of hear, and there's a bunch of other experiences. You know, like there was one time where I had a friend that when the subject finally came up after being friends with this guy for a year, when the topic of religion came up and he found out I wasn't religious, he told me, I'd rather you be a Satanist because at least then you believe in God. There are things that happen to you psychologically. Um, and there's a sort of justified paranoia you have when people tell you that they're religious because you know that they're capable of being good, but you don't know this person is one of them. And you have to kind of test the waters a little bit with these people, and you have to kind of not be afraid to say what you think early, so that way when they find out they can decide if they're tolerant or open-minded enough to include you in their life. And you don't really have like you can't really pick and choose who you are in your life because so many people are write you off for simply opinion or to not include you too much or have too much of a friendship with you because they perceive you as having a different set of values, even though most of them will tell you that they thought you had the same values as them because they don't and they don't understand that they never really given two thoughts about their own values. I was kind of explaining this to a friend of mine who wanted to learn how to study the Bible more, and he knew that I'm not religious, and he is a really good friend of mine who wants to study the Bible more. And he asked me specifically for questions that were very tough for a religious person to answer, as somebody who has read the Bible a good bit, and who has talked to a lot of religious people, and who has been in a lot of religious arguments. And he said, like, I'm not trying to argue with you or convince you of anything. I just want to have direction, which was a very inviting experience. It was a very pleasant, ending conversation. In conversation with him, I kind of explained to him how I feel I have more in common with gay people than straight people. Not because I'm attracted to men or anything, but because I feel like I understand what it's like to be closeted a little bit. And I kind of told him, we had a separate conversation. This is when I was kind of mentioning this to him, where I was talking about how I had a friend who is uh, very proudly gay and sometimes can be a little annoying with it. And he was like, "Yeah, I hate it when they do that." And I was like, "Well, I mean, there's a really good reason for it." And he was asking me what the reasons were, and I kind of told him, well, I asked him about that, and he was explaining to me how a lot of times when you are gay, you don't really have a whole lot of sexual experiences until like it's you're much older, so you end up becoming like overly sexual. And he kind of agreed with me when I told him. I said, "Do you think that it's similar to how I kind of force religion conversations sometimes because I figure it's better for me to include that in conversations and to kind of force a sort of conclusive yes or no be a part of my life kind of thing. So that way, people who are intolerant, you're not really wasting your time with them." And he said, "Yeah, that's pretty fair. You can kind of act pretty gay, and if people have a problem, you know who to avoid because people will make it very clear that they have a problem with it. When people behave in certain ways, there's a reason for it. Now, I take this thought to the extreme, where I say that I don't believe in free will. I'm one of those people that doesn't believe in free will. I think that virtually any action that you take, everybody has reasons or information, regardless if those reasons are good or bad, or that information is true or false, for doing anything that they do. And some of it is genetic, some of it is biological, some of it is sociological, some of it is cultural, some of it is self perception and mental illness. And so it's with these experiences that I was never surprised as a deputy when a black inmate would accuse me of being racist. It was for a few reasons. Sometimes it was for good reasons, and sometimes it was for bad reasons. I would say that there was more often bad reasons than good reasons, but that's because some criminals are inherently dishonest people, and they've learned to dishonesty, they've learned to try to take advantage and be a little bit manipulative. And sometimes, that's just kind of one of the things that like a lot of inmates will say is that I'm just going to call you racist because I don't have an actual argument. And then sometimes it's people who have actually experienced racism who don't know how to discern racist individuals from non-racist individuals. And normally that comes from a sort of trauma, or that comes from a sort of, or that comes from a unverifiable but known fact that it is the case that there is some form of racism that they're usually encountering, especially in a jail or prison setting where if you're a black man, somebody from you, and you might have somebody with a 7 point star the other direction, and a bunch of people, one bunch of white guys with shaved heads, you're going to be a little bit uneducated. And so I was always really uncomfortable when a deputy would come up to me and say things like, "Oh, they just want to call you racist." I'm actually trying to understand it, especially if that deputy would say racist shit. And as a deputy, like, are you going to tell on every single person that says something concerning because you want to sacrifice your own career to be somebody who wants to be politically correct? I mean, there's a sort of no snitching culture amongst police that they criticize inmates for having. I say also that the title of this video, I'm thinking about calling it "The Things That Conservatives Don't Understand." The reason why I want to call it that is because one, my last video was things that liberals don't understand, and I feel like it would be a logical follow up to that video. However, I do think that this is a message that I feel honest conservatives need to hear without trying to feel judged and without trying to really use the politics of Trump and what's currently happening and oh my God, who did you vote for? I don't. It's not about those things. It's about your ideology and what is presented. There are good reasons and there are bad reasons and there are random ass reasons that are neither good nor bad in my opinion for there not being trust in certain institutions and there not being trust between groups of people. And what I think conservatives really need to understand is that we live in a world where it's not the open marketplace of ideas. You know, as a matter of fact, it actually might be if you want to think about it in a very specific way. And the economy to be a successful business does not mean to offer the best product. It's to offer the best advertisement. The one that convinces you most to purchase it isn't necessarily the best. And we know this. We know this because any cereal that you purchase can easily be proven to come from the same warehouse as the off-brand, but it's 2 to 3 times the price because you want to have name brand. People like having name brand because it's a lot of things are recognition. A lot of things aren't really. Like, a lot of times when you look at the world, it's not what I think it is. And a lot of times when you have ideas, you don't fully understand where your ideas come from. It's a very complex way of understanding the world, understand where your ideas come from. I think you should not be surprised when people disagree with you. If you're surprised when people disagree with you, your inclination to be sensitive of those things, you actively the thing that a lot of conservative propaganda wants you to do, as well as liberal propaganda to some extent. Actually, to a lot, you are failing to recognize what has been tailored to you and what identity has been and perfectly represents itself to you, so that you can feel like you can have quality of you, and you can play as smart or stupid as you want to. If there's trust in an institution, that there's normally a couple of really good reasons. Reason number one, and it's the one that a lot of conservatives like to say, oh my God, there's just a lot of propaganda to make like it, to fund the police. Oh my God, it's this massive movement to try to make people doubt police officers. Oh my God, the other protesting military mass movement. I think it's military. I think we're very well true. However, it is also true that whenever an institution is caught lying, even if it's not the whole thing, even if it's a small group of people within that institution, uh, it is very hard to not view that as an overall representation. It is up to the individual group to advertise and to be open and honest enough with themselves and externally to build trust across communities and across ideologies. If you are up the function that you don't have to convince people who disagree with you why your ideas are good, then why is it important to even have a conversation with you or to care about your feelings? I really want to stress this. You know, the reason why you like police so as much as you do, uh, it could be a number of reasons, right? I like police because I know a lot of friends in policing, and I have family in policing, and I used to do it. Not really policing. I was in law enforcement with a very specific job, but that's beside the point. There's a lot that goes into it though, and there's a lot of dishonest information that kind of comes out of it. What do you think happens to the public when the taser makes an entire term for a spontaneous death that almost always happens after a taser incident? What happens when you're willing to defend nearly indefensible actions on behalf of law enforcement? What does that tell people for the good officers? That they're going to get defended no matter what, and that it's a political line about whether or not you agree with police action as opposed to actual logic rationale. Your desire to destroy woke politics and the liberal ideology and conspiracy to make your children gay has made you stronger in fewer numbers, but vulnerable to having more enemies. If you are a conservative, you have to ask yourself, if you don't trust the government just because the Republicans are in charge. If you think the government's inefficient, why do you care so much about very specific branches of the government? What do you not understand about your own government? What is actually efficient in preventing crime versus inefficient and not preventing crime? Where is the cost actually going? If you're looking to celebrity tweets, you're a part of the advertising infrastructure that has made it to where it has become virtually impenetrable. And while I like to say that 2% a grassroots revolution of people being desperate, finally desperate enough, being tired of companies who are so deregulated and fuck over workers, customers so heavily that they are tired of it, and that a minimum amount of violence can be partook in uh, to actually make the necessary changes to make the average American's life better. I don't understand how where somebody can get shot and we're okay with it. I wish I could say that, but I think cry exists for a health insurance. We're not allowed to cry over the people that guy killed. Well, we're okay with people dying because it looks cleaner, because it's the optics, and it's a succession of optics that really makes it to where it's it's so hard to present information to you because you care more about how information looks than listening to what your opposition has to say, or you don't listen to your opposition when it comes to doing your weird arguments. I think it's very telling of the conservative mindset who can look at people who accuse them of being racist when racist groups are perfectly willing to associate themselves with the conservative movement. Look, who are accused of being pro-corporate and anti-worker, when all their policies seem to reflect that. And your best argument is, well, the Democrats voted for the same thing. So because you did a bad thing, I can do a bad thing. And because you have a different ideology, I can immediately dismiss it as you're just somebody who's going to disagree with me no matter what I say. I think it was Goggins that if you're fat, which I people if people that they might be mean, you might also just be fat. If people are calling you racist, they might be mean and they might be divisive of your opinions, but at some point you got to ask yourself, you know, why is this the consistent argument that people are giving me, and why is it that whenever I try to communicate my opinions, people are aggressive with me or they're dismissive of views. But you don't really question yourself for this. It's fascinating. And genuinely, this is my perception. This is also what I don't understand about conservatism. That might be a really good, more accurate title for this video. What I don't understand about conservatism, you know, it blows my mind how little self accountability it seems like you guys have. It really, I don't know how to square a circle with people who will complain about gas prices but won't blame Trump for it. That's not Trump derangement syndrome. It's literally the result of an Iran war that MAGA started. Now, not just the MAGA voters, but the MAGA institution that we currently have. It's a fuck up, and you got to own it. Just like the many other fuck ups that you guys have had recently. I mean, you keep trying to prove your point, and you keep trying to piss me off, and then when I get pissed off, you point at me and you say, "Oh, look how violent you are. Look at how rational you are. You just don't like us." I think I'm just sick and tired of the marketing ploys and the complete insincere communication that comes from these institutions just enough to get power and then immediately make institutions. I have no hope for a country where if I were to sit here and tell you that Christopher Columbus is not somebody that you should be looking up to at all. Outside of what politics, he didn't really do that many good things at all. Actually, he didn't really do any good things. Now that I think about it, he sailed west and he was wrong virtually every single point in turn. But a baseline understanding of history is considered woke and offensive because it's acknowledging harm that he's actually created with his actions. If that's controversial, how do you want me to communicate with you outside of jerking you off? Because I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. And it seems to me that what you don't understand is a lot of times the conservatives seem to just want people to jerk them off and to jerk off their ideas and to tell them how right they are and how wrong everybody else is. And then whenever that's brought up to them, they say, well, the Democrats do the same thing. Yeah, that's what a lot of ideas do. But this is online politics, and in the real world, we're people with different opinions, and we need to come to some sort of resolution to how to actually make it functional. And so I really need you to understand that you create unsustainable models for government by forcing this weird merger of your ideology. You have completely ruined your own any moral grants that you have for your own values, and have constantly demonstrated over and over again that you are perfectly willing to ignore your own values if it's inconvenient, and as long as you can feign ignorance or just simply claim to know something that you do not know. If entire ideology has to appear this dishonest to me, then the thing I think you don't understand is I have the reason not to believe the thing that you say as a conservative. I thought I had conservatives when I would argue with liberals, and I would basically say, "Hey, I carry guns. I'm not necessarily in favor of banning guns. I think some of the gun regulations that you advocate for are a little bit naive and kind of show more of an ignorance in how firearms work on your part. I think you know it is that I think that we have this weird merger of people who want to ban guns and people who are denying those people who are banning guns. These are things that I would have agreed with you on if you wouldn't then say, well, Alex Preddy had a gun, so even though he wasn't using it on officers, it was okay for him to get shot. I don't know a single fucking actual officer who would dare publicly say that they supported the shooting of Alex Preddy, but because it's political, you're willing to support it because it's a game to you. It's football. It's the reason why I don't like football players. And to be honest with you, a lot of football fans do the same fucking thing. It's like when your team gets a flag, even if it's a really good fucking flag, it's bullshit. Oh my god, it's bullshit. It's not unfair. They did the same thing. Blah blah blah. And if the other team gets flagged, no matter how bullshit that flag is, to the point to where because I have no stakes in the football fucking games that I watch. Right? If I watch a football game and I see that somebody else got flagged and I get that rule explained to me and I see it and I'm like, well, yeah, obviously they broke the rule. If that's the other person's team, the fan of that team will go, oh my god, no, it's not a perfect ruling, and they'll have this weird series of thoughts of somehow that not being a legitimate that being a legitimate flag or an illegitimate flag. And it just seems to me that this is what it's like to talk to conservatives. And it's why I don't take what you have to say seriously, and it's why your interest in dominating politics has made it to where I neither have the time nor the care to intellectually engage with you. And until you're willing to step outside of your own comfort zone and occasionally admit that you may not fully understand what you're talking about, I have nothing for you. And I think most people don't either. And I think you understand how much you're sabotaging your own politics by doing this because there's a reason why conservatives voted for Joe Biden. There's a reason why more conservatives are going to vote Democrat eventually. It's because you can only poison the well before your own fish sick too. You can only spray a herbicide to get rid of the weeds before you start killing your own crops. And this is what you do every single time. You don't actually care about many things. And if you did, you wouldn't defend half the things that you defend. Or you would be critical of yourselves before you were critical of me. Because you expect me to disagree with you. But if somebody else is using the Republican Party or the conservatism or your Christian values as a guise to push an idea, if you're not the first ones to criticize those people, all you're doing is ruining legitimacy with anybody on the outside. There's a reason why the online atheist community has kind of gotten onto Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris because they tried to be anti-trans and anti-Islam and to a little bit too concerning of a degree. And this has somewhat restored a little bit of legitimacy as well as the need to build a community and to effectively communicate ideas to its outside. It's necessary because we don't have the popular opinion. We don't have the appealing for advertising. So we have to be more appealing. But you arrogantly believe yourself to be so appealing that you don't understand that it's just a jersey mentality. The moment a Democrat suggests the same thing that you suggest, all of a sudden you're against it, and that shows insincerity. I genuinely don't know how to end this video. I really need to understand what it would actually take to to get you to be a little bit more honest about your own politics. And I'm asking conservatives as a whole because and if your first inclination is to criticize my politics, then that clearly just shows that you're not even interested in acknowledging your own flaws, because you have to preface everything with you having a problem first. I've criticized my own politics. I've criticized people who I mostly agree with. Um, Liberals and leftists tend to be a lot more individualistic and a lot more disagreeable people because we think a little bit more individually, and we have it takes a little bit more to convince us of things. I wish that many of you would respect my intelligence enough to be at least a little bit more honest with yourselves and with me when you're talking with me about these things, because it's exhaustive. It's ridiculous. You know, you can sit here and say, "Oh, I'm just because some people in the church were mean to me," but then you go around and you like, how am I supposed to take that seriously if you're willing to go around and cry because a Starbucks employee said "Happy Holidays"? If you're willing to go around and cry because somebody somewhere might be trans? If you want to make up stories about kitty litter boxes in schools that have been proven untrue over and over and over again, and yet because you keep saying it's true, you're trying to define reality. How can I respect people who say they want free speech, but you guys are the ones that are crafting libraries to take books away? I genuinely don't understand what more you have. You have nothing to offer me as a party, as an ideology, as a set of principles, as a respectable group of people outside of my own worldview that can't seem to mind your own fucking business most of the time. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe it is an us versus you mentality that I should be having. But I would like to at least extend an olive branch a little bit and assume that most of you are just a little bit ignorant of how you look to outsiders. Because that to me is the little bit of hope that I have to grasp onto, and that in an appeal for an adult rationality, uh, and a hope for a more cooperative future.